Good morning and welcome to today's session on taking control of data. This session should last about 45 minutes and we'll be having a Q&A session at the end. So we're extremely lucky to be joined by some great speakers today. We have from HouseMark, Arturo Del. He's their Data and Product Development Director. Arturo is widely known as one of the thought leaders within the social housing and public sectors with regards to data, and he's helped a great many organisations on their data journeys. Indeed, if you're looking for someone to help you and provide a critical friend element to your journey, I'd highly recommend Arturo. And then from Westward Housing, we're very lucky to be joined by Mick Capon, Assistant Director of Transformation, and Chris Charman, their Senior Business Analyst. And Westward will be talking about their data quality framework, which I affectionately call the Westward Way. And it provides a really great example of how you can get something quite powerful in place to get data under control relatively quickly and cost effectively. So why is this so important? Well, I apologise if I'm telling many of you something you already know, but the performance of social housing organisations is under scrutiny like probably never before. And the consequences of making mistakes can be dire. And there's an increasing number of headlines about those that have been fined or fired. If you were watching the BBC this morning, you'll have seen the headlines that the fire safety bill is now coming into law. This was only going to kind of compound the amount of scrutiny and risk that there is. Be under no illusion, social housing data is coming under the spotlight. And I believe now that poor data management probably presents a greater risk to executive security than pretty much anything else. So we need solutions and we need them quickly. This was actually a conclusion of a presentation I attended on Wednesday last week. The Chartered Institute of IT had hosted Doug Silverstone, and if I'm not sure you've come across Doug, but he was until recently Director of Data at Metropolitan Thames Valley. Doug is one of the sector's data superstars, and he started at Metropolitan Thames Valley back in 2016, so around about 5 years ago now. And he said that it was only last year that he felt that he really had got his data under control and could start to generate some true insight from it. His journey involved the creation of a data lake and a master data management system. He didn't say what it cost them, but he did say that if it was replicated across the social housing sector, it would cost billions. I was left thinking the sector hasn't got the money, the time, or indeed the Doug Silverstones to really need to be able to achieve this, so that there must be a better way. So on that thought, I hope you find today's session insightful, and I'm going to hand over to Arturo. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Can I check that you can hear me? Is that okay? Yeah, it's coming through. Brilliant. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I've got a few minutes to share some ideas with you, and this topic is absolutely very close to my heart and the things that I'm really interested in, particularly because, as Colin said, I totally believe that we are at an absolutely essential point in being able to take control of data, but also more importantly to really get value out of data. And I'm going to talk in this session about things that I've learned working with organizations in the sector, and some of the insights that I hope will help you along this journey with some ideas that hopefully you can take back and implement. So let's get started. So I'm sure many of you have heard about the concept of the data value chain, and if we were in a physical meeting, this is where I would do a show of hands, and I would ask people, how many of you have heard about this? But since we're not, then I'll imagine that there'll be a few hands raised. So the value chain of data, or the data value chain, is a concept that is quite old actually, but you know, I don't think there's a better way of describing and representing how data moves across organizations, going from its raw format into ultimately delivering value. And because of my role in HouseMark and the ability that I've had to really engage with a lot of people in the sector around this, I've seen a lot of different patterns around this, and really, to be perfectly honest, in the sector, I think, from my experience, many organizations are at the point of trying to wrest control of their reporting, getting the best way in which operational people can get access to data, maybe in a fresh way that gives insight. Some organizations have really mastered reporting and got it down to a really good level. And maybe few organizations in the sector are moving more into the analysis phase. And that may surprise you. You may think, well, wow, I think people are much further ahead than that. I mean, you've mentioned Doug and others in the sector, but the reality is that what comes after analysis is really being able to use data to drive action and to be able to really demonstrate that the data and the analysis of that data is really giving action, is driving the action of the business that generates the value. And this is more difficult than it may appear. It involves elements of culture. It involves how organizations are structured and how they feel and how they operate around this value chain. So some of the other things that I'm seeing in housing that are interesting is that cloud and the emergence of cloud has really had an impact on this value chain. A lot of what used to be done, in-house and perhaps with a lot of specialisms has started to be challenged, and a lot of things come bundled. Lots of tools come bundled in packages like Office 365 and Azure, which opens a lot of opportunities to accelerate this journey. So this is a useful framework for thinking about this, and I just want to concentrate for today on the first step of this value chain, which is with the data itself and how the data is created, and talk a little bit about data quality. So Colin said this, and I just have to echo it, that data quality is a concern for the regulator of social housing. If you look at the Consumer Regulation Review, there is a point very importantly stated in one of the areas of the report that says effective assurance relies on good quality data and effective systems, and how organizations are able to demonstrate this is going to become more and more important as we move forward. But not only is this important from a regulatory perspective, this is also costing us money. The problems that we have with data and the problems around data quality are costing us. But again, an imaginary show of hands, how much do you think this costs? So we've taken a report that was produced by the Royal Mail data team a few years ago. And basically it said that the cost of poor quality customer contact data to UK organizations is now running at an average of 5.9% of annual revenue. And just doing some simple calculations, looking at the accounts of the sector, if you extrapolate that across the sector, we are talking about 1.23 billion pounds of costs to the sector on poor quality data. And just to make the point that this is referring to English Housing Association. So we are talking about something very, very significant here. Just imagine what could be done if we could actually even have a dent on this huge amount. And you'll be asking yourselves, well, what is it? How is this demonstrated? So let me introduce you to the concept of the hidden data factory. And this is a really interesting idea. So for those of you who've been into the world of manufacturing or Six Sigma, there is a concept in there which is the hidden factory, which is the idea that in a production line, the hidden factory is a workaround. So you'd go through in your chain, you'd take something out, do a bit of a workaround and put it back in the chain. And actually, when you look at all those workarounds put together, you've got like a hidden factory that is probably bigger than the factory that is actually producing the work. And what's really interesting is that if you take that concept and apply it to data, you start getting an idea of the size of the challenge. So some examples of the hidden data factory, and I'm hoping that all of you will feel that this represents it to some degree your organizations. So checking and cleaning data. How long do you spend doing that? Ad hoc processes and key spreadsheets. Data massaging from one system to another, and the duplication of effort. So all of this stuff put together, and including other things that perhaps are more established but don't need to be, like, for example, lots of gatekeepers, lots of experts that stand in the way of people accessing the data. These are all what I would call the hidden data factory in our organizations. And if you're interested in seeing more of this, I would strongly recommend that you have a look at this book by Thomas Redman, which is a really good book on data quality, and some of these ideas I took from there. But a really great way of getting into it, and also a very good way of starting to quantify and define exactly how much is it costing your organizations not to take control of your data. So from a HouseMark experience, I just wanted to share some of what we've learned working with our customers around this. So how does benchmarking help with data quality? And that's a question that we are very attuned to. And we have a large number of conversations with our members. As they submit the data, we look at it, we evaluate it, we go back to a point that in 2020, there were over 14,000 validation queries that we discussed with our members. And these are all things where we will go back and say, are you sure about this figure? And it'll go back and trigger some internal discussion, which actually brings the data to a higher quality standard. And actually, I would even go further that in some sectors, benchmarking is key for data quality. In the NHS manual for data quality, there are a lot of key points of advice, consistent use of NHS numbers, quality assurance, blah, 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 blah. But if you look further, they recommend to use local and national benchmarking to identify data quality issues and analyze trends. And this is something that we see all the time, because even with the best knowledge of your own information, sometimes you need to know that your data is completely out of kilter within a peer group or within a larger cohort to understand whether you are really an outlier. So this is something that has given us a really privileged position to understand, one, the quality of the data within the sector, but also how working systematically can improve that. So going back to the value chain, just very briefly, what's the point of having all this data? It gets clean and you've improved it. What do you do with that? So just a quick mention around the analysis. So we've talked about, the data driving the value and the analysis being one of the key parts because it triggers the action. So I just wanted to again share an example, a recent example for us and how this has had an impact. So as we all know, we've had a last year that's been very different, and a lot of people reacting to COVID and finding the best way to address a very uncertain situation. And data has been an absolute essential tool of this. And as a HouseMark, we responded to this in the same way. We looked at our data, we looked at what we could do with it, we looked at the quality of it and provide analysis for our members. So one of the things that we did was the COVID impact monitoring, where we tracked critical PIs month on month and provided reports for our members. And even beyond that, we looked at forecasting. Were we able, with the historical data we had, in a moment of confusion for the sector, to start bringing some forecasting that actually may not be perfect, but it actually helps organizations compare with their own exercises around forecasting. And this is really where I think it's a very good example to talk about action, because maybe on a day-to-day, the action you take is very much embedded in your processes. But when you have a crisis like COVID, action is essential, and being able to drive it with good quality data and analysis is one of the things that we saw and learned hugely from the crisis. So just to wrap it up, and of course, Colin, this is I have a lot to say on this topic, so I'm only scratching the surface here. So we may have a series on the data value chain and talk about all the different elements. But just to wrap it up, this is all about treating data as an asset. It requires a long-term commitment. Over 10 years is what I say when I go to organizations and talk about this, and it requires executive leadership. And actually, housing has a great experience of managing property as assets, so this shouldn't come as a surprise. Data is just another asset, and it needs to be managed in the same way. The other thing I would say is finding mechanisms like these analyses from Redman and others to attach a financial value to data really helps. It gets people focused, and it really drives, other than the regulation, it really focuses the minds. Of course, exposing the data factories and eliminating them is essential. I think the following presentations will probably talk a little bit about how you can get data streamlined and in the hands of more people. And then just realize and really kind of understand that data is really a unique asset class, and it can provide constantly increased value. You not only get value from the data you have, but you also have value with the data you add, and how you can personalize the services with this data. So that's just a quick run through for hopefully gets you some ideas and helps for the rest of the session.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Arturo. Incredibly insightful. 1.2 billion. I mean, that, just think how many houses that is, and not only that, but also consider that 1.2 billion probably consists of a lot of people's time, and if that time could be liberated and started to use to grow even greater insight and analysis and ultimately actions within the sector, just think of the value that could create. Anyway, I'll now move over and hand over to Mick, and we can start looking at how you can practically make a difference. Mick, over to you.
Thanks, Colin. Afternoon, everybody. So just kind of following on from that same theme, really, at Westward Housing Group, we've been looking at data for some time now, so I'm just going to talk about our sort of data journey and what we've learned. So Westward, for those who don't know, is in the southwest of or in the south of the UK. So we cover Devon and Cornwall, so a lovely part of the country. We have, because always the question people want to know when you say you work for a housing association, or other people do, is how many units have you got? So there's one of our dashboards there to sort of show that. So we've got 7,620 properties. So I just want to kind of cover this really, and sort of where data plays a part in digital transformation, which a lot of people are looking at pre-COVID. People were doing transformation programs. It's probably escalated that up in terms of that. But data is really important to that process. And at Westward, our Evolved Digital Transformation Program is all wrapped around key 9 principles. And those principles underpin the program, and they're split into 3 key areas one being the customer. So we have a 3 around that, which is making a digital difference to our customers. Holistic view of the customers and processes through digital workflow. Then we've got our workforce, and that's around self-development through digital. Data is everyone's responsibility, changing culture to digital. And then finally, the business area, which is decision by data, working with our digital partners, and the way that we implement our Evolve program is through a number of iterations. The key fact, though, is underneath all of those, there are 3 key areas that all relate to data, and that's why data is so important to us as we go through the Evolve program. And just to kind of following on from the previous presentation there, and about that kind of those data steps, really just underlining that again, but in a different way, slightly different way anyway, which is about that statement. So that's the statement around what business intelligence is, BI, which a lot of people refer to it as, and the way that kind of operates in that pyramid perspective is the collection of data, and then the interrogation or integration of that data, so pulling data from different areas of the business, so the information collection, and then that bit that was referred to around the analysis of that, and then producing information that people can use to action that decision by data element, really. And a lot of us have changed the way that we looked at data, and especially Chris, who's going to be helping me today, Westward's journey away from that kind of historical look at performance about where you are, which is still valid and still needed, but actually being more proactive about the way that we use data, so we can look at areas of the business where we can put in proactive approach to analysing data, so those jobs that are going to go out of date, those appointments that may not be met, so they can be actioned before that actually happens. So that change in terms of not just about performance, it's actually about using data to ensure that we're consistent and we can drive services and be really helpful to our customers in terms of customer excellence as well. And then the kind of trends and predictions. So yes, there's kind of the historical look back, but actually saying, can we use that information so we can identify when we've got trends within the business, so you know the kind of winter summer differences between the repairs that we might carry out, and then obviously following that you want to then predict what may happen in the future, and then around plotting data over maps so we can look at areas of concentration or areas of need within our service areas. And then finally, kind of matching that to the new white paper that's come out, the customer insight stuff and customer sentiment, which we're all used to from, you know, from the big organizations around Amazon. When we get a parcel delivered, we're really looking at that from our customers now in saying, what did you think of what we've just done? And that's now a really critical part where we probably haven't got that data at the moment, but we will need to collect. So from our perspective and looking at that journey, our kind of initial, and it was quite interesting again from the previous presentation around the number of years this takes. We started looking at data at Westward back in 2017-18. And the first priority for us was what we call turning off the data tap. And this is really about closing down the errors that occur within data. And there's loads of analogies for this. There's, you know, it's like shoveling snow in a blizzard or sweeping up leaves in a hurricane, is that as soon as you start to cleanse it, people then put in more bad data, or you collect more bad data, and therefore you kind of almost get back to square one. If not, you're basically running on a treadmill forever, really. So our first priority is to see if we could actually close down that particular area. But it's where do you start when you start looking at your data, especially if you've got an enterprise framework, your kind of technology stack, which is widespread, and you've got different systems that are dependent on other systems. So for us, kind of data started with workshops, trying to identify that key data where it is. That then enabled us to produce loads of different reports out of the system. Then we analysed that through spreadsheets, which again was referred to. This is kind of back to that data factory that was the hidden data factory that was referred to. Absolutely what you do. You get caught in that, and then you cleanse the data, you create exception reports, and then you start again. And this is very time consuming and difficult to do. And actually, although your data starts to get better, you've still got the issue of actually that really doesn't close down the tap to turn off the tap. You can't actually get people to put in data correctly just by sending them exception reports and hoping they go onto your intranet and read all the rules about in your data dictionary about how data should be entered into your legacy systems. So we needed a change of approach. We needed something that would actually move away from this and present a model which was much more around the ability for us to do that data validation at the point of entry. Our housing management system doesn't do a lot of that. We needed something else that could do it. So we were looking for something that would present alerts to us immediately as soon as data is entered, or at least the next day, so we could identify when data was being entered wrong. We needed something that empowered a wider number of users to be able to analyze data in the way that we want to, without maybe having sort of SQL skills and those kind of things, really. And the ability to analyze data across different systems. So whether that was our housing management system, our supported housing system, or even the unstructured areas around SharePoint or network drives, that's what we needed to do. And then we needed to link that so we could use the visualization tools like Power BI to present that information, not just around our data quality, but all those other aspects of those types of visualization that now the business demands. And we also needed that to be time stamped so that we could look at it from a perspective of looking back to do that kind of analysis around predicting data and looking at trends, but also that we knew when data was actually analysed, so we could then look forward to saying from this point on, this is when we need to look at data. And finally, just around those things linked to GDPR, around the kind of SAR stuff, and retention was another area we needed to do. So at Westward, we chose InfoBoss to do that. So it's a tool that enables you to do that data analysis, but also for us acts like a data warehouse in many respects, really. So for us, the kind of key effect, the key area which we needed to resolve around data quality was all back to turning off the data tap and how we were going to do that now. So what we needed to do was to create alerts against the data dictionary. We had a data dictionary that was in a spreadsheet that once we did it, nobody really looked at. With InfoBoss, that data dictionary has been embedded within that data analysis tool. So when you create the rules, it scans the data to look to see if those rules are being applied. And we needed to do that against new data that's being entered. So for us at the present time, it was like, let's just forget about the backlog just for a minute, and let's focus on really stopping people from entering data wrong in the first place, because we thought if we can do that, then we can then refocus on that data that's entered in, our historical data that's been entered in wrong. So our process is, once we've done that, we're going to run through the process of creating people, property and tenancies to look at the key data within those particular areas. And then we are going to ensure that there's ownership in the business, so that when those alerts are created around that key data that's been entered, the action will be taken, and we will monitor that to ensure that data is corrected. And we kind of see this really as the kind of data alchemy, that if you can turn off the tap and stop the errors going forward, then you can really focus on correcting the data that historically is wrong within your organization. So for us, our data plan is to use InfoBoss to do that. We want to categorize our data. So actually, when we look at data, we want to kind of RAG test it. So example of that would be, there'd be zero tolerance to any property that has got gas, that isn't on a gas service contract. It seems an obvious one. We cannot tolerate not even one property where that exists. Where the other extreme may be, we've not got initials against individuals within the databases, and that actually would not be seen as a major issue. It's a kind of consistency issue. And then splitting that into a number of categories. So that kind of high volume, low impact, we'd only want to see it as being stuff that's actually being put in now that is wrong, and validate that and not worry too much about the backlog. And in those other areas, so if we've got a low volume and it's a low impact, if it's not a lot to do, then let's correct it and definitely cleanse the kind of high volume, high impact stuff. And the way that kind of looks for us is that for things like initials being missing, and you've probably got other examples of things that are kind of consistency issues, then gradually we feel if we can stop people doing that in the first place and ensuring that it's right, we will see a gradual decrease of those areas within that as we get new people onto the system and older people leaving the system or moving on, and the same with properties and tenancies. And then for that high to medium, having a real impact on as soon as we've got those alerts working and we're closing that tap off, we will really concentrate on the backlog for the high and low medium stuff. For us, the key difference in terms of the target operating model is that pre-2020, that was kind of a pretty similar look, I'd imagine, for a lot of social housing with your operational departments, your customer services, your development team for properties, and then your back end services. For us, the key change for us is that we will be creating a BI team that will focus really on data quality, but also the creation and management of the dashboards and information that people need to empower them to analyze their own data within their particular areas and make those key decisions by data. So I'm going to hand over to Chris now, and Chris is just going to show some examples of the things that we've done at Westward. Chris.
Thank you, Mick. Share my screen. There we go. Okay, what I'd like to do is actually show you a couple of real-world examples, or a real-world example of what Mick has just been talking about. The information that you can see on this Power BI report is effectively a summary of all the exception reports and data dictionary type reports that we've actually created out of InfoBoss. And as you can see, we've got rather a lot of them, and I'm very pleased to say that many of them are actually at 0 or 1 or very low numbers. But what we can do here is just look at a particular report, and this report was written to show a particular reason, i.e. the termination reason died for a particular tenancy. This shows us the last 30 days. Which is quite interesting, but it doesn't really show us an awful lot more than that. So what we've done here, and this is the turning the data tap off, as Mick was alluding to a little earlier. We've got a historical number of 239 of these particular items, and what we've done is actually effectively set a control cutoff date of the 1st of April 2021. So that means that since that date, we've actually had 2 new items that have actually broken the rules for that particular piece of data quality. And we've also got a history count here of 237 items. This is very useful because, as Mick alluded to, we've now got the ability, using InfoBoss and with the visual side in Power BI, to actually show this information graphically and easily. And whilst we can get alerts out of InfoBoss, what we can also do with the power of Power BI and Office 365, we can actually create alerts from here. And we can, for example, not this is a particularly important item, but if as Mick said, the gas service thing is a particular issue, we can create an alert for that using Microsoft Flow, which is actually powered or triggered from Power BI. And that can then actually be used to set up an urgent meeting with the managers who are actually responsible for that particular area. So it gives us, by conglomerating all the data together, by rationalizing it, by visualizing it, and then running alerts from it, gives us enormous power over business processes and making sure that, as Mick said, the sort of data that we've got is good and wholesome going forward. And if you have any extra questions or anything like that, that would be marvellous, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. It's great to actually see things being put into practice here, and that dirty data tap that Nick mentioned, I think is absolutely crucial. If you know that you've turned that off, and now anything you do going forward is only going to create a positive impact, I think you know, it's half the battle. I look back over time at the amount of support we've provided organisations to get their data quality right, only to find we're invited back a couple of years later to help them do it again. I mean, it's just so frustrating for all concerned. Anyway, a number of questions have come in. One of them that literally just come in that I know is a question a lot of people struggle with is I'm going to fire at Mick, which is how did you integrate InfoBoss with your core business systems, and is it real time?
Thanks, Colin. It's done by a process of indexing. Say that it was probably Chris is the person to ask about how that's actually done. But literally, it's looking at the tables within your backend systems, and they index them into InfoBoss, and we pull that information over whenever we want it. Really, I think we kind of do it at the moment sort of once a day, but that can be increased to whenever we need to do that. So it is quite technical, the indexing, and InfoBoss are happy to assist with that. I think if you've got people in your IT team that can that are skilled up in kind of SQL and stuff, then they're pretty good at doing that kind of thing, really. And I think this is the beauty of it, really, because what we've done in creating the BI team is to move that out of IT to free them up to really provide us with real technical support on doing things like the indexing. So we've got multiple systems that we've indexed. We've actually indexed to a CSV file from our supported housing system. So it's not necessarily it needs to be table to table either.
And are we saying that's real time, Nick? So
it can be, yes. It depends on how often you want to do it. Obviously, a lot of our data we wouldn't really need in real time. So with the alerts, for instance, you know, if someone's putting data that's wrong, giving them an alert the next day is probably enough. I don't know whether as soon as they've done it, we need to fire off an alert to say you've just put this in wrong. Maybe we'll get to that. Would be good, but we're kind of looking the day after, really, from that perspective.
No, excellent, thank you. I've got to admit that ability to react very quickly is all part for me of changing that culture around data, because you know 80% of your people will probably do it very well, but there'll be that 20% that the continual problem areas, and to be able to recognize who they are, be able to give them the development, training and support they need is absolutely key to changing things going forward. Another question that's come in, and it's kind of on topic with our self-service BI side of things, which I'll ask both Mick and Arturo. Should you have a BI department, as it were, who does it all, or should you allow all different component parts of your business to actually create reports themselves? So start with you on that, Mick, and then pass it to you, Arturo, with regards to how you might see it happening in the future. So Mick.
Yes, definitely. I feel it depends on the size of your organization, I suppose. That's the kind of key element. And can you afford to have a BI team? I mean, as I said, you know, we're not a massive organization, probably in the kind of middle area of social housing, but I think that just illustrates the changes in work, really, and the kind of roles that are required within businesses such as social housing. So that change from needing people that are BAs within a BI team, is that changing? Those are the jobs of the future, really. That's what we need to be able to work effectively. So that shift from some of the jobs that digital change will you know eliminate, that transfer of those roles into other areas of the business. So yeah, I think it's a really well, we've seen it as a really important function, along with things like, you know, project management office and so on. They're really adding value to businesses now, becoming critical part of the target operating model. Tremendous.
And Arturo?
Yeah, So I would agree completely with Mick, and I think if we kind of take this perspective, really, it's all about gaining this value that I mentioned out of the data and getting the people who understand the business processes, who understand what are the objectives and the goals of the company closer to the data, is one of the key ways of achieving that. Now, what is important for everyone to recognize is that as more data becomes available through digital, as the volumes grow, this becomes quite a specialist task. And on the one hand, you are freeing the data for more people to access, but on the other hand, you have a bigger responsibility on more technical people, call them data engineers or a different kind of breed of people who ultimately what they do is they are the ones who are plumbing this data, getting it to the good quality, and enabling it to be shared across the organization. And I think this change is really accelerated by cloud, is what I would say.
Fabulous. No, thank you. Another question that's come in is with regards to, I guess the costs. It's apparently reported that about 50% of a lot of data analysts' time is spent actually getting the data in order before they can actually do any analysis on it. Is this reflected in the experience at Westward and before and after, if you like, Mick?
I think the true value of it is kind of hidden, but it kind of relates to what Arturo was saying around those hidden costs and getting them out of the business. We've spent a lot of time doing a data analysis, but actually the cost of not having data correct for the business in terms of potentially making wrong decisions, in terms of doing customer analysis so we can target services. If we could, it's about, in fact, what we're actually doing as part of the Evolve program is benchmarking our services now. So as we begin to improve, hopefully part of that will be around the quality of our data, and actually we can actually see the cost benefits coming out. Are probably a little bit early for us to say that it's made that massive change at the moment.
Okay, no, brilliant. And I'm looking at the time now. We've got 3 minutes left, and there's questions coming in at a rate of knots, and a lot of them aimed at you, Mick. So I'm going to fire them away and see what we can get answered. What version of Power BI do Westward use?
That'd be a question for Chris.
Chris?
It's actually the desktop where we actually create the reports. We keep up to date with that. We're normally about a month behind, but in terms of the actual viewing, that's done in Office 365. So whatever our IT people give us, basically, but it's pretty up to date.
Well, the beauty of SaaS is you're probably on the very latest version.
I'm actually pretty sure we are. Yeah.
Fantastic. Is Infoboss a full data warehouse solution, and can you run Power BI from it?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Chris. So is it a full data warehouse? I think it can be. I think it depends what backend systems you're plugging into it and how you use it. We definitely see it as our data warehouse. We have another one which is just related to Capita, and that being a data warehouse. But I think this is a lot more effective. So I would say yes, and the other answer is yes, you can. So yeah.
Okay, and what do you use a Microsoft 365 consultancy, e.g. Power Automate, Workflow Development, etc., and who is it?
Right, okay, so that's a really good question, actually, and we are doing work with a company called Pythagoras who've helped us implement SharePoint. We are now, because one of our key principles is around digital partnerships, they are helping us, and we've actually, they enabled us to get a £10,000 grant from Microsoft to do this, but we are currently working with them around our 365 offering, really. So not the kind of Dynamics route, actually probably looking at Power App combination of omni-channel. So we are using Pythagoras to help us with that, and no doubt we will be linking that to Infoboss as well in the future. But it's something within our innovation plan that we are doing, and we definitely need a 365 partner to help us to do that.
Thank you, Mick. Look, I hate to do this to everyone, but we have got a fair few questions that have come in and we're just running out of time. So we'll make sure we come back to you with regards to those separately. We won't forget. We're going to be putting the recording up online for anyone who might want to see it. And of course, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us, even if you think of them after the session. So it's 12:45. I wanted to make sure we finished on time. I know how important lunch breaks can be. You know, we need a break every now and again. So thank you very much for coming to today's session. I hope it's been valuable, and look forward to doing another one for you guys soon. All the best. Bye.